to the Crash Course podcast. My name is CraigCrash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We've got a great podcast on deck for you guys tonight. We're going to talk about the end of the IndyCar season. We're going to get into building an NFL franchise. B. Scott and I just have $12. You know that Patrick Star meme where he just holds up $3? He's like, all I have is $3. That's what we're going to try to build an NFL team with. We're also going to talk about MLB pennant races. It's been a minute since we talked MLB, so we're going to get into that as, of course, next week is our MLB playoff conversation, so a lot of baseball on tap over the next couple of weeks. But first, B. Scott, I saw you took your lovely wife, Erin, to a Purdue game this weekend. How fun was that?
Well, I mean, it was fun. The game sucked.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a bad game. I mean, honestly, we had to get back home for some stuff with the kids, so we left after Aiden O'Connell threw his second interception. It was like, man, yeah, they're gonna lose this game, and so we listened to the rest of it in the car on the way home to beat the traffic. Obviously, you know what the traffic's like after those games, and so we were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they actually came from behind and won this thing. But they shouldn't have had to come from behind against Illinois to begin with. But on a high note, that was without their number one running back, their number one wide receiver, their number one tight end.
Two running backs, right? Horvath and
Daru. So basically their number one and number two running back. And then they lost their number one tight end early in the game. In the stadium, it felt like it should have been a targeting. My dad says on TV, no, it wasn't a targeting. But when you hear the pop of helmets all the way up in the stands and somebody's head goes flying, yeah, so apparently Payne Durham, he had lacerations to his gums and bruised ribs. It was like equivalent of getting hit by a truck.
Jesus.
It was unreal. And then, yeah. So, and we also lost one of our number one defensive tackles in the game as well to a concussion as well. So luckily they look like they'll be getting David Bell back. No sign on King Daru. All we know is he's dealing with a medical condition that may keep him out the entire year. They don't know. And then most likely Payne Durham will not be playing either. But it looks like Aiden O'Connell is going to be the quarterback going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the struggles for Indiana football in general, whether it's college, whether it's the pro game, because we're not going to talk Colts tonight because we've kind of covered everything that you could say about the Colts.
You can't say anything more about the Colts.
Is that you could sum it up with, hey, you know what? We need to start finishing drives. Like, there's a lot of settling for field goals with a lot of teams. I mean, it was a field goal fest that you saw with Purdue and Illinois. Ball State settled for 4 field goals against Toledo. Field goals have been pretty much all the Colts have been able to muster out of a lot of their drives. So, I mean, we need to start seeing a lot more touchdowns across the state if we want.
Well, especially when you have these coaches that are supposed to be offensive gurus. Jeff Brom is supposed to be an offensive guru. Now, I do understand he was his hands were tied this past weekend with limited personnel, and you don't want to throw out all the stops, especially against Illinois, and you don't want to go crazy with all your backups. But Frank Reich, even, it's just like his game management is strange. Now, I'll say this one thing: there is breaking news from the Colts. Apparently, the Colts and Marlon Mack have agreed to seek out a trade for Marlon Mack, which is, it's a good thing. He hasn't, because he was a healthy scratch this past weekend. So, he that fresh start, especially now when the Colts look like they're going with Naheem Hines and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, it kind of stinks because that was kind of one of the storylines we thought was going to be interesting to follow is hey, you've got 2 1,000-yard rushers coming back to be in your backfield, Mack and Taylor. What a combination. And not to say, I mean, Naheem Hines was supposed to be a good tertiary option, and instead he's been the number 2, and they haven't really even done anything with Marlon Mack. I mean, I know that it's hurt my mom's fantasy team. She drafted Marlon Mack. I thought that was a good pick going into the season, and instead It's not been too much of anything. So it kind of is a bummer, but hopefully they can get a trade sorted out for all sides, and it can be something positive that Colts can get. Hey, maybe even get back, because I know this next year is going to be another like weird draft year, right, with draft picks. So like if they could get even a pick back, like
it's going to be another. I mean, it's going to be weird if we keep losing and rolling Carson Wentz out there all gimpy, because if he plays 75% of the snaps, guess what? That potential right now could be a top 10, top 5 pick.
You almost
goes to Philadelphia.
You almost need to like gauge where you are here in the next couple of weeks, because I mean, a few years ago they started 0-5 and ended up rallying, and of course we know the story after that. They made it to the playoffs and everything. It's almost like if they get into 0-5, 0-6 territory now, even with the one game more on your schedule, you might think about just going ahead and punting on this season, sit Carson Wentz the rest of the season, which I don't know at that point. I mean, I guess theoretically at that point you're more than a quarter of the way through the season. But I mean, even then you still can bench him and not use him 75%, right? At that point.
Right.
So, I mean, you might just say, hey, we're 0-6. Let's go ahead and bench our quarterback. And I know that's not great for, morale and locker room, camaraderie. But I think if everyone's bought in on the plan of like, hey, this is for next year. Clearly, it's not happening this year.
Right.
Then
here's what you
get
do.
Everybody to buy in.
Here's what you do. Don't want to get too far off topic, but here's what you do. Put him on IR. That's like, 6-8 weeks he's got to stay off the roster, stay off the field. Sign Cam Newton. He's just sitting there. He's serviceable at least. And go for it, Now, if you just bench Carson Wentz and then throw Brett Hundley out there or Jacob Eason, yeah. But put him on IR, make it look like you're trying, even if you're still losing, Because now the Carson Wentz experiment seems to have failed just based off of injuries. And who knows? Maybe Cam Newton could be an answer.
I don't know that I would call like the Wentz experiment like already a failure. I mean, it has been so far.
It's looking that way
for sure. But I mean, as far as I do like that idea. I forget about the fact that we see that all the time in like baseball where they're like he's his arm is sore and he's like after he just gave up like 11 earned runs in a start and you're like we know what this is. Like that can be what they do with Wentz. They're like oh no, his leg fell off. Oh no, we gotta put him on IR for a few weeks. And so they could go ahead and do that.
He could barely move out there.
Right.
So he needs something.
Right. So steering it more back, although actually real quick before we steer it back and do some IndyCar, I do want to mention that it has been a big we'll talk about failures. How is it that I haven't thought to put the Office background behind me? If you're watching on YouTube or on Twitch, I have put the background to the Office talking heads on the Zoom call, and I think that's what's going to be there from here on out. Normally I switch it to whatever we're talking about that week, but I think I was going to start switching it to the different logos, so have NFL behind me if we're talking mainly about NFL, baseball if we're talking about baseball, but I think this is here to stay. I do like this.
Yeah, I do too. I think it looks really good.
So going now into our first topic of the night, we're going to talk about the end of the 2021 IndyCar season, the Acura GP of Long Beach. It was set to be an epic battle. Alex Palou, Pato Award. All Alex Palou had to do is finish 11th. Pato Award right on his heels. But Pato Award involved in an incident on lap 2 with Sebastian Bourdais and Ed Jones. He also was ran off the course to bring out the second caution. So Award was the cause of the first 2 cautions in the race and was not really a factor. There were 7 lead changes among 7 drivers. Colton Herta takes the lead following the final caution on lap 64 and wins the Acura GP of Long Beach. He led 43 laps. Joseph Newgarden, Scott Dixon, Alex Palou, and Simon Pagenaud round out the top 5. Alex Palou wins the title for the IndyCar season. It's obviously his first title. He in his second full season. He's the first Spaniard to win an IndyCar championship. And he
really?
Yeah, I know that
That's
that was
surprising.
That's kind of was surprising because I mean you think of all the drivers that have ran, you would have thought, that.
But have they been Spaniards? I guess.
Right. But anyway, he defeats Joseph Newgarden by 38 points. He won 3 races this season: Alabama, Road America, and Portland. It's his first full/normal season in IndyCar, because remember, his rookie season was last year, and it was the weird COVID season. So I mean, they still ran 14 races, but it still wasn't a normal year. And so, you know what? It's pretty exciting. I mean, the youth movement is in full force. You have Alex Palou, who is 24, Pato O'Ward, who's 22. He finished 3rd in the point standings. Colton Herta, who's 21, he finishes 5th in the point standings. And then it's not that like Joseph Newgarden and Marcus Ericsson, some of the other guys in that top area of the point standings, are necessarily super old. So you've got, but they're, more established names, but you have these kind of newer drivers who have come in over these past few years and now are finally starting to take center stage. It's really pretty fun to watch. And I think next year's IndyCar season is wide open. I mean, you have those youngsters that we talked about, plus, the ageless Scott Dixon. I think Alexander Rossi could have a bounce back year next year. You've got, already some silly season moves where drivers are moving around, and that could cause some crazy things to happen. So I think, in terms of the sport, I think it's a really good time to buy in on IndyCar right now, because you're finally breaking away. I mean, heck, at the beginning of the year, we were talking about how, the dominant year that Scott Dixon had the previous year, and Scott Dixon is a name that we talk about constantly, when we talk about IndyCar, and he was a mainstay even in our college days. And then you have Joseph Newgarden. He and Dixon have been swapping titles over the past few years, and I think, and that was kind of why we chose who we chose at the beginning of the year. It was like, well, it's going to be one of the two. And I think next year you have, maybe 5, 6, 7 drivers to choose from, because, and including Polo. I think Pelo's, primed to have a good season again next year. So it's really going to be a fun off season and then a fun regular season next year in IndyCar to watch. And I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, me too. I was really excited. It was really good to see a new face holding the Astor Cup. Props to Chip Ganassi, I gotta say. That's what what it all comes down to it. Props to him for seeing that talent and pouncing on it, because a second-year driver doesn't typically get thrown in with the big boys of Ganassi or Penske or anything like that. So to be able to see this young guy come in there, look, he was racing along. His teammates were, Tony Kanaan for a little bit, Scott Dixon, Jimmy Johnson. Those are all championship caliber drivers, whether or not they've won IndyCar Jimmy Johnson, no IndyCar championships, but NASCAR. Just think about the mentoring that he gets on a daily basis from that team. That's just unbelievable. And then you could see last year that Alex Palou was going to be a special driver. You just didn't know it was going to happen this quickly. What's great about him is that he's an aggressive driver, but he's also a smart driver. He pushes it, and reminds me a lot of Alexander Rossi in that sense. For some reason, Alexander Rossi has lost that edge, that aggressive edge that he used to have, that I always thought would lead Alexander Rossi to a championship, but it never did. Alex Palou, I think, Alex Palou has a little bit much better equipment underneath him on a every week basis compared to Alexander Rossi. But I love that there's a youth movement now. And it's still going to be good that there's guys like Scott Dixon, like Simon Pagenaud, even, I guess. Can you count Page as somebody that's up there?
I don't know where he is age-wise as far as the youth movement goes, but...
Oh, he's definitely older.
Right.
But, you can tell IndyCar is now starting to come around to it, because, Tony Kanaan, I don't think has a ride next year. I think he's done. James Hinchcliffe, he's looking like he's going to do more broadcasting. Ryan Hunter-Reay, I haven't read anything about where he's going. I mean, I guess when you look at the teams, the oldest team is probably going to be Myers Shank with Elio and Simon. Penske's is going younger. I mean, Will Power is going to be the old grizzled vet of that team. It's going to be Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin, and watch for him to have a really solid year too. I know we're going to get to that in a little bit later, but rookie of the year. So yeah, the future is very exciting for IndyCar because you always have that worry that how is a sport going to transition from these current stars to the next? The NFL was had to go think about that for a while, with Peyton Manning getting up there in age, Eli Manning, and Tom Brady. Well, he's still around, but those guys, and it's succeeded. The transition has been smooth with Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield. So IndyCar is now starting to go through that, and to be able to see that essentially the top three, 4 of the top 5 are all young drivers. That's great. I mean, Joseph Newgarden's still relatively young.
He's 30. He's my
30?
age. Yeah, he's my age. Well, I mean, not that I say that like we're that far apart in age, but I mean,
still, I didn't realize he was 30.
Yeah.
Okay, but even 30 is still young, especially when you see guys like Elio Castroneves. You act like I'm old. But you see guys like Elio Castroneves still out there winning the Indy 500, and so 30 is not that. I'll still put Joseph Newgarden in the youth movement because he is a newer star.
Right.
And looking at guys like the Tony Kanans, the Scott Dixons, the Ryan Hunter-Reys, those guys moving on. They're not moving on.
When you think about it, like, I mean, I know it's different in auto racing, but 30 is typically like kind of the cutoff when a athlete, in any sport is starting to kind of get, towards
they're getting into
their prime. Yeah.
Or some positions are right in their prime.
Or like on the tail end of their prime.
Right. So with racing, it's almost like that's where you're starting. Kind of like with baseball, it seems like too. Baseball, you see them later 20s.
Yeah.
When they make the big show. But yeah, I'm super excited about the future of IndyCar. But what's great is that they're not dominating the field. You still see the guys like Scott Dixon, even though he had a quiet 4th place finish in the standings. To me, he didn't really just have that Scott Dixon feel to his season. There was a few races. I mean, he won, but he was never just a constant threat every single race like he has been. Whereas Alex Palou felt like it there for a while, and then he tailed off, and then because that's when Pato O'Ward took the points lead. But it's good. This is great. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see these three that you mentioned, Polo, O'Ward, and Herta, battling it out for the next 10 years as long as everybody stays in IndyCar. And if I had to say, I would say that Herta is the next one of that bunch to win a championship.
Now, like, I'm trying to think, before we move on to next season, I was trying to think about, like, did we really see this type of youth movement, like, kind of like when Scott Dixon and all them were younger? Because I feel like around the time that, like, some of these older guys were first coming into the league, like, into IndyCar, it was, like, sort of at the tail end of, like, the merger, like, the integration with kart. And, like, some of those drivers were, like, not, like, were new to IndyCar, but not, like, new to racing. They were like older. So, like, I feel like there wasn't really a youth movement like this. And I can't remember, like, a time, at least since I've, like, followed the sport as closely, like, which would be, like, 2000 was my first Indy 500. Like, I don't remember there being one, like, quite this vast as far as you having a bunch of drivers. I mean, there's obviously been new drivers to, like, get on the scene and you're like, oh, here's a rookie that's really good. But it's, like I said, I don't remember a time where there was, like, this many young drivers that you go into the next season like, oh, these are all championship contenders.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been this large of a youth movement before in IndyCar. I mean, not in my memory. I'm sure there has been at some point in time. But, there's been a small trickle here or there. I mean, right. Alexander Rossi, his rookie year winning the 100s, running the Indy 500. Nevis when he was a rookie. You know, there's been those types of things. I mean, Dan Weldon when he was younger. I guess maybe if there was anything, it may have been then, because if you think about it, at that point, you had a young Dan Weldon, you had a young Will Power. You know, Will Power
was Will Power the same time as Dan Weldon? I mean, I know when Weldon won his second 500, he was, but
maybe not. But you had
you had Danica.
You had like Sam Danica. You had Sam Hornish Jr.
Yeah.
You had a young Tony Kanaan.
Right.
At that point, I mean, obviously a young Scott Dixon, a young Dario Franchitti. So those guys all kind of came up around the same time, but I'm not 100% certain, like, you know, to this extent.
Right, and I don't think they were all. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think they were all like really early 20s, and I mean, and with because they, like I said, a lot of those guys all had like extensive, I feel like, open wheel like backgrounds, whereas like you have like as well.
Yeah,
I mean, like because I know Elio came from like kart, and I think Hornish was like always IndyCar. Danica, I can't remember what Danica did before.
She was USAC.
USAC, okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that would probably be the best like comparison. But I don't know. I mean, like I said, all of those I don't think were really. They were more like probably in their mid to late 20s as opposed to being like fresh into their 20s.
Yeah, and then I can't remember. Did Polo, was he Indy Lights?
I don't remember, honestly.
Because I mean, Award and Herta are shining examples of why the road to Indy. Through the Indy Lights series is such a great program.
Right.
I mean, I remember watching both of those guys battle it out in the Freedom 100, not against each other, essentially, but perhaps 1 year. But, you know, I mean, I'll tell you this much for IndyCar. I love the youth movement, and I also love the fact that Formula One drivers are starting to realize, hey, you know what? I don't need to bounce around these really bad teams in Formula One. I can go to IndyCar and drive a really good car.
You know what's fun? Passing. Let's go to IndyCar.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. Or these guys are like, I'm tired of waiting for my time in Formula One when all it is Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton.
Right.
Opportunity now over an IndyCar, I'm taking it because they've seen how Fernando Alonso did with his Indy 500 run, his one Indy 500 run. Now they're seeing Roman Grosjean have success. So I'm loving that because it is also bringing a whole other fan base over to IndyCar. And then when they come over to watch that driver or follow their story, guess what? They're seeing these young drivers battle it out as well. And it's just like, it's captivating. And I think this is really the sport in the series is in a really good spot right now going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And looking at going forward, we look a little bit at the 2022 season, and the first question is, which driver can be the next Alex Palou? For me, I mean, obviously he's going to be right there again next year, but we just mean in terms of like another driver to maybe, you know, do something like what he did, you know, in his first few seasons. In terms of youth, I would go with Colton Herta. I mean, 6 wins, 17 top fives. In 48 career races. He had 3 wins this past season, which I think is the most that he's ever had in a season. He's had back-to-back finishes in the top 5s in points. He was 5th this season and 3rd in 2020. In terms of second season drivers, though, I mean, Romain Grosjean literally can have the Alex Palou story, where you know, he's going to be, you know, he finished 15th in points in 2021 with Dale Coyne, which is exactly what Polo did in 2020. Polo finished like middle of the pack in points and then goes on to win. So if you're looking for a literal carbon copy, even though Grosjean obviously is 35, so he's not part of the youth movement, you know, he's part of that Formula One movement that you were talking about. He does take over the DHL ride from Andretti Autosport, which was formerly Ryan Hunter-Reay. So Ryan Hunter-Reay is out. Grosjean is in. And I think, you know what, regardless of who it is, I think next year's IndyCar season is going to be fun because you're going to have like we talked about, you're going to have Polo and Dixon with Ganassi, Grosjean and Herta with Andretti, and obviously Rossi in there as well, and then you've got Newgarden with Penske. I mean, we could see the three.
Don't forget about Scott McLaughlin.
Scott McLaughlin as well, could really all, be in the mix for the three powers. Like, I know you don't really, when you talk, especially in today's like sports, you don't want to talk about the powers that be getting stronger. But I think this is one instance where all the powers that be are going to be strong at the same time, and it's going to be really fun to watch.
Oh yeah, I agree. But I mean, it's just the nature of the sport. It's just like in NASCAR. I mean, the powers that be are always going to be the powers that be, right, no matter what. And it is nice to see, I do believe, McLaren, essentially, Arrow McLaren, on the cusp of being one of the powers that be. By joining by Arrow and Schmidt-Peterson joining forces with McLaren, that's now putting them in a position where they have the money to throw around with the big boys, because that's what McLaren does. And I think with their driver setup and their race strategist, between just that whole team is just on the rise as well. So as far as like a driver that can set themselves up, to be like who I think is going to be that next step next year, I agree with you. The next Alex Palou in terms of youth is Colton Herta. I even said it earlier. I mean, he knows how to win races, and he knows how to put it on the pole. It's just, for him, it's about starting to get that consistency going. You could see that more this year. I think that's going to be the next step in his progression. Another full year with actual Andretti is going to be a good thing for him. Because technically this was his first year with Andretti fully. So I agree with that. But in terms of second season drivers, I love the pick of Romain Grosjean. I know that's an easy pick. I still say Scott McLaughlin is a driver to keep an eye out on. He is a championship caliber driver from supercars in Australia. And that helps. But also Jimmy Johnson, as the season went on, he got more and more comfortable in the car.
Is he running a full schedule next year?
I believe so. He's been testing in ovals. Once they get on ovals, I have a feeling Jimmy Johnson that's going to be his bread and butter, is where he's going to be really good. Especially because he knows Texas. He knows Indianapolis. He's won at both places in NASCAR. Come on. It'll be interesting for him on the shorter tracks. But do I think he's going to win a championship? No. Come on. He's not. Just because of how good the youth is right now. And then there's that other level of veterans that are even still ahead of him. I think out of all the rookies this past season, I think Romain Grosjean is the first to contend for a championship.
Well, he can literally have a carbon copy. It's like first 2 years.
Literally. But yeah, I mean, it's so tough. But like you said, next season is going to be fun, because nobody's going to be overlooking Polo next year. I mean, man. And I want to see how these veterans that did not do too well this year do. And then Penske kind of had a down year, if you think about it. Yeah, Joseph Newgarden finished second in the points, but it wasn't that there was nothing like super exciting about his season. I think he got 2 wins.
Yeah, he got a couple wins. He
hadn't
had less than 3 wins in like a few seasons.
So I mean, if he's going to get back in victory lane frequently again. And if he can run consistent like he did this year, I mean, look, he didn't win that many races and he still finished second in the points. Penske is going to figure out some issues. Any issues they had this year, they'll figure those out as well. Roger Penske, he owns the series. He doesn't want to get embarrassed by losing or being runner-up. So next season's going to be fun. And adding a race to the schedule, that's going to be fun. I think it's another oval, if I'm correct. So I love oval racing. I know everybody loves street racing or road courses.
Yeah, I prefer the
I
ovals.
love
Yeah.
the ovals because in road courses and street races, they can get so spread out, and it all just comes down to pit strategy. Yeah, pit strategy is a great thing, but give me the old fashioned passing and not have, oh, can he set him up in this passing zone? Oh no, he didn't get him, and that means he's gonna be behind for another 3 laps, and maybe then he can set him up. Whereas ovals, it's just you're on the edge of your seat the entire time for an oval.
Yeah, I agree completely. And speaking of the schedule, that's the perfect see, B Scott, we're killing it with segues right now. Looking at
It's like you send me the notes a day in advance.
right, yeah, weird how that works out. The schedule for next season, it's gonna all kick off February 27th in the streets of St. Pete. Some other key dates on the schedule: May 14th is when they're gonna be at the IMS Grand Prix. May 29th is the 106th running of the Indy 500. July 23rd and 24th is the doubleheader at Iowa. That returns to the schedule. That's really exciting. July 30th, they'll return to the Indy Road Course. I would assume that's going to be like it was this past year with NASCAR.
Yeah, because NASCAR's the 31st.
Right. August 7th, they'll be in Nashville. September 11th is going to be the finale at Laguna Seca. So, one quick question before we wrap up IndyCar for the 2021 season. Which race are you most excited for? We talked about it. I'm excited that they're back at Iowa. Iowa, when they first brought it to the schedule, was one of my favorite races. My favorite memory of it was when they first ever race there. It was when Scott Dixon was in the 9, Dario Franchitti was in the 10. I think that in that season. And Scott Dixon and Franchitti, I think, both got in a wreck on the first couple laps of the race. And because there was so much carnage in that race, Scott Dixon, I think, still finished top 5 because everybody had wrecked, and he even though he took some damage, was able it wasn't critical damage where it would put him out of the race, and he there was a little bit of duct tape on his car, there was a little bit of they had to change a wing or whatever. It was something like that, and maybe it was Frankie. It was one of the two that ended up finishing 5th. They were still a couple laps down maybe, but it was just wild. So I'm with you. I love short track racing. Those races when IndyCar, I think this is part of it because when I first really got into IndyCar, they were still at Richmond, and that was with I remember the 2 Red Bull cars when they had Cheever and Scheckter, and they were doing really well. And you had when the Target cars were predominantly white with red striping, which was a long time ago. That was when they first came in with Target Chip Ganassi, and when they were still Target. I remember back in those earlier days when they raced at Richmond, or at least earlier in my fandom, not earlier days, but I enjoy those short tracks. Heck, I remember when they used to race at Dover. I remember watching Ayrton Dare and Mark Dismore and all those guys race at Dover. So I'm excited to see. I've always wanted to see IndyCar at Bristol too. Seeing those short tracks on the schedule, seeing them go back to Iowa is really exciting for me.
Yeah, Iowa's a good choice. I am excited to see. I mean, obviously the Indy 500. You can't.
Glad they brought that one back.
I'm so glad. Oh man, that was.
I was real worried that was going to be on the schedule.
I guess. I mean, I always like Gateway. That's one of my favorites. One, because I still want to get out there, and it's such an easy drive, and they typically also do the doubleheader with the NASCAR Truck Series.
Yeah.
So that one's a fun one, but I'm interested to see how Nashville does the second time around, because the first time there's all that excitement and everybody's just pumped for it. Well, how does it go the second year around when everybody's it's okay, the fanfare and the celebration of the inaugural is done.
Right.
Now what do we do?
Especially because the inaugural was exciting. You had the Marcus Ericsson thing. You had, all this carnage though that people because people, I remember when all the stuff happened in NASCAR with the IMS road course, everybody was talking about how comparing the two races. So I mean, You know, if there's more carnage next year that's not the novelty, like how will it be received?
Craig, do you have a word of the calendar or word of the day calendar?
Oh, am I saying carnage too much?
Oh my gosh, you said carnage like in the last 5 minutes, probably about 10 times.
Hey, you know what? If you get, it's like that episode of How I Met Your Mother with the Robin drinking games. I guess you pick a word of the week,
But
but and that's what you stick to.
there you go. We're gonna start a drinking game. Every time he says carnage.
Every time he says carnage, you know what? And then I'm gonna be exactly like that episode and just start saying it on purpose. I'm gonna integrate it into my daily vocabulary.
You know what movie I'm gonna go see this weekend? Let there be carnage.
All right. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say to wrap up IndyCar? All right. Well,
no, I mean, heck of a season. Let's do it again next year.
Yeah. Very, very excited for next season's IndyCar schedule. All right. So before we move on to our NFL draft, we're going to quickly talk about our friends of the show. First, starting with Anchor. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. #ad. Don't even worry about that. Anchor allows us to put on the podcast every week. They are a website where you can either record directly onto the website, or you can record like we do and then put it on the website. They'll take your feed, they'll distribute it to a bunch of different podcasting sites like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. It allows you to have an archive. It allows you to monetize. They allow you to monetize pretty much right off the get-go. So really a great way to start your podcast if you're looking to get into that line. So if you want to do that, Anchor, is probably the best place to do that. Also, this podcast is brought to you by Eat Lunch and Board Game. It's a podcast that my cousin Adam Collins does. He has guests on every week, talk a lot about how board games, playing board games, especially at work, can help you build connections. And so if you're a big board game fan, then go over and check out his podcast. He supports our podcast. We support his podcast. And he does great stuff over there, so go check him out. And remember to hit us up on all of our socials, at 3C Media Sports on Twitter, Crash Course Podcast on Facebook, 3C Media on TikTok and YouTube. A lot of TikTok-only content where we do little short, breakdown videos. Also, we've got the YouTube channel where we, not only have this podcast, but the MCT podcast that comes out every weekend. That's our YouTube exclusive content, as well as there's other content that we post to the YouTube channel. So go over and subscribe to 3C Media on YouTube. You can also interact with us every week at twitch.tv/CraigCrash. That's where you can watch the podcast live if you do want to interact with us. We've already had Elle in the chat. She said she was late, but she is still here. We appreciate you being here, Elle, who also has a podcast. So you'll want to, that's all about writing. If you are an aspiring author, go check that out. And then you also can catch us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. I try to get through that quicker than I normally do, because typically I take like 5 minutes to tell you about all the things that are not only things that you hear every week, but things that are also on the screen below me that you can also read. But I want to make sure you guys at home, if you're listening to it on the podcast, on a podcast app, you can still get all that information. So moving on, we've got kind of an interesting segment to do, and we are going to build an NFL franchise. Now, everybody has seen those graphics on Twitter where or wherever that say, hey, you've got $12 to build a team. So this is the tier for $5. Here's the tier for $4, and so on. And these are the guys that you have to draft from each tier, and you have to pick somebody from each level. So that's what B. Scott and I are going to do. Now we're going to put a little bit of a different spin on it, because typically you can just pick, the way that you have it, you can literally pick 4 number ones if you want. You could pick, 4 $1 players if you want. You can do all $2 players if you want. We're going to draft our players, and not only that, we're going to take 1 per tier. Now, we're only doing 4 picks, so you can't take 1 from every tier. But we're going to go through...
That doesn't work. That doesn't add up. If I have to take one per tier.
No, so I'm saying you won't be able to take one per tier. Like, but like for what I'm saying is, if you draft somebody from the five, you can't take two $5 and two $1. Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you have to do one $2, one $1, one $4, one $5. You're gonna leave one tier out completely.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're going to do that draft now, and actually, how I'm gonna decide who gets the first pick is I'm going to do a coin flip app here. And B Scott, you're gonna call it in the air. What do you call?
Heads.
It is heads, so B Scott gets the first pick, and then we're gonna do a snake draft. So you pick first, then I have two, then you have two, and then so on and so forth. So go ahead, B Scott, with your. Well, actually, no. Let me be a good podcaster and tell you what the tiers are. You've got.
They can't see our notes.
They can't see our notes here. So like I said, $12 to build a team. The $5 tier is Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, running back Christian McCaffrey, Devontae Adams at wide receiver, and tight end Travis Kelce. $4 tier. Well, let's just do by position. Quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes at $5, Kyler Murray at $4, Baker Mayfield at $3, Justin Herbert at $2, Trevor Lawrence at $1. At running back, you have Christian McCaffrey at $5, Alvin Kamara at $4, Josh Jacobs at $3, Jonathan Taylor at $2, and Najee Harris at $1. Wide receiver, you have Devontae Adams at $5, DK Metcalf at $4. You have Justin Jefferson at 3, Calvin Ridley at 2, and Devonta Smith at 1. And then for tight ends, you have Travis Kelce at 5, George Kittle at 4, Darren Waller at 3, Mark Andrews at 2, Kyle Pitts at 1. So, B. Scott, now go ahead and lead us off.
You know what? I am going to start off with Jonathan Taylor at the $2 tier.
Yeah. Any reasoning behind that, B. Scott?
I mean, he's a bright young back, and honestly, I feel like he probably should have. To be honest, I think he should have
been higher.
Yeah, I think he should have been higher than him and Josh Jacobs should have.
Yeah, you're definitely. I mean, you already snaking a player from me. Because I was going to select. I was going to get Justin Taylor in a later round, or Jonathan Taylor, excuse me. That's definitely a good pick. Yeah, he and Josh Jacobs should definitely be flipped. Great value at $2 to start off your franchise. So B. Scott, starting things off with your running back.
You want to take off the list? I tried to ask for edit access.
Yeah. Take Jonathan Taylor off.
Yeah. That way I can remember. I can remember who you took as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go in and just edit it, and you can. Will you still be able to see it?
Yeah, I can see you make changes.
Okay. Cool.
We are working on a Google Doc, by the way, folks.
Yeah. So we're gonna take Jonathan Taylor off. So there you go. He is off the $2 tier. You know what? Live and on the fly. I actually have it on my iPad too, so I may just do it from there. All right, so with my first pick, I'm actually gonna go through. I'm surprised you didn't go quarterback with your one, but I'm afraid you might snake my quarterback because I feel like it's kind of a good pick for your value, and you get to save a little money. I'm gonna go with my quarterback. I'm going Kyler Murray, $4 tier. Reason being, I probably should have changed it up because now that my running back is gone, but I'm still going to take Murray at $4 because honestly, you get to save $1 because he's maybe not as good as Patrick Mahomes, but he's got a lot of the same qualities, some of the same attributes as far as being really good at like playing on the run and being somebody who can make plays happen with his legs, and doesn't necessarily mean he tucks and runs every time. Just means that he can escape the pocket, make some good throws. We've seen what he's been able to do this year. With all that talent around him, he even had a good season last year. I think he played a little bit of the late part of the season hurt. So Kyler Murray has another quarterback that you thought, hey, how much of what he's did in college was because he plays in the Big 12, because he plays in those high octane offenses, similar to Mahomes, where we weren't really sure how that would translate to the NFL, and so far so good. So I think you get some of the same qualities as you get with Mahomes, but you get them at one tier cheaper. It gets you, allows you to kind of save some money going down the pike, and so that's where I'm going. I'm going Kyler Murray with my first pick, and then my second pick, I'm going to go ahead and take my $5 tier, and I'm going to go ahead and take Travis Kelce, because it's kind of the wide receivers on this list. I mean, obviously Devontae Adams is very good. Obviously, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, Devonta Smith, all very good wide receivers. But I feel like wide receivers, you can find a good wide receiver. There's very few tight ends that can do what Travis Kelce does. I mean, he's the best tight end in the game. You're getting a player at
no George Kittle.
No, not on this list. I already took a $4 player, so I couldn't take Kittle even if I wanted to. But
that's right, he is on there.
Yeah, George Kittle. You got George Kittle, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts, and all of them have the capability to be a top level tight end. But I think Travis Kelce is the best at his position. I don't know that you can necessarily. I mean, there's arguments to be made. Devontae Adams, could be talked about as, a wide, top wide receiver in the game, but where's Amari Cooper? You could argue there's some wide receivers that aren't even on this list where you could say they are, at least especially right now, maybe the best wide receiver in the game, or one of the best wide receivers, or a wide receiver you'd rather build your franchise with, like Cooper Kupp. There's other players that you get into that conversation, which I don't think applies to tight ends. So I'm going Kyler Murray with the first pick as my quarterback, and I'm going Travis Kelce with my tight end with my second pick.
I like it. All right. So for my second pick, so I get 2 picks right now.
Right.
Okay. So with my second pick, I'm going in the $4 tier. I'm taking wide receiver DK Metcalf. This guy is just a freak of nature when it comes to athleticism and size and speed and just all of the above. You haven't seen anything like that in the league maybe since Calvin Johnson, and that's a difference maker on offense. Somebody that can go up and get that 50-50 ball, but also has that breakaway speed to beat somebody over the top. Those two things don't come together. They just don't. You're either big and have good vertical skills, or you're fast and have good hands. You don't have all of it. And DK Metcalf, if he can get out of his own way, like maturity-wise, he has the ability to be one of, if not the most dominant wide receiver in the NFL. So I'm at $6 now.
Yes.
And I'm halfway through. So now I am going to jump into the $5 tier. $5. I'm taking my quarterback. I'm getting Pat Mahomes. I mean, it's Pat Mahomes. It doesn't need too much of an explanation. This guy can do just about anything. I mean, I've never seen anybody that can throw, they can sidearm a ball, 50 yards, it seems like. I mean, what he can do with a ball, he knows how to put curve on the football. He can throw it around somebody. It is unbelievable what he can do with a football. So giving him talent like Jonathan Taylor and DK Metcalf is only going to make him even better. So I'm at $11 now. So obviously my next tier is going to be the $1 tier, obviously.
You gotta take I was gonna say you're down to, so you're taking Kyle Pitts because you're down to $1 and you can only...
I'll just go ahead and make that pick. I'm taking Kyle Pitts mostly because Kyle Pitts, he's, I think he could eventually be one of the better tight ends in the NFL. His wingspan and his athleticism, he's essentially just another wide receiver if you think about it. Honestly, I always wanted the Colts to take him. because I thought he would have been a great fit for somebody to take over for Jack Doyle. I mean, the measurables on him. We always talk about the measurables. The measurables on Kyle Pitts is just out of this world for, like, especially wingspan. I think it's like he's got a wingspan of over 7 feet. I mean, it's unreal. And he was a major weapon for the Florida Gators. So I think he's actually really good value because he's so young at the $1 tier. He's only going to get better.
Yeah.
And especially when you don't with the other guys I put around him and the quarterback and Pat Mahomes will make him look better. And the other guys around him, you're not going to expect as much from Kyle Pitts when you have DK Metcalf and Jonathan Taylor and Pat Mahomes. Right. So,
yeah, and I mean, that's a solid team. So yeah, your team winds up being what? Patrick Mahomes, Jonathan Taylor, DK Metcalf, and Kyle Pitts. That's not bad. My two choices, and they're kind of already predetermined as well. Although, I mean, depending on what I want to do here, because I only have $3 left, so I can't take anybody from the $3 tier, and there's no running back at the $2 tier to take anymore. So I'm going to go Najee Harris at the $1 tier, get my running back. He's had a solid start to the season. The only thing I'm a little worried about is the reputation that Alabama running backs have sometimes got. I mean, Mark Ingram's carved out a nice enough career for himself. Obviously, you have Derrick Henry, who have had good careers.
We're talking about Trent Richardson and Eddie Lacy.
Yeah, Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy. You could even maybe throw T.J. Yeldon in there if you're really trying to make the argument.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
So, you've got some of the guys like that, but Glenn Coffey, if we really want to go old school.
That is old school. I think we're more so talking about Trent Richardson and Eddie Lacy. For sure. TJ Yeldon just played on a bad team.
Yeah, Yeldon was just kind of like the Nyheim Hines of the Jacksonville Jaguars, but it was also the Jacksonville Jaguars, so that's why that didn't really work out. But Najee Harris, he's had a good start to his rookie campaign. He's a good downhill, strong runner. I like having him at my running back. Running back's these last two positions, that's kind of why I wanted to go quarterback, tight end, like 1-2, because really, I mean, again, like all these running backs that are on this list, there are other running backs that you could mention that you would like. I mean, heck, if Nyheim Hines was on this list, I would take him maybe over Najee Harris. Maybe not necessarily to be my number one back, but I mean, Zeke's not on here. You don't have Saquon on here. Like, there's other running backs that you would put in, and it's the same with wide receivers. I'm going Calvin Ridley, so I mean, that's kind of the silver lining is I get Calvin Ridley, who's a little bit more proven than Devonta Smith, who is going to be my top choice at wide receiver. I mean, again, there's guys for both positions, running back and wide receiver, that aren't on this list that I think are more plentiful. Whereas I think Kyler Murray, you save a little bit of bucks, you get a Patrick Mahomes kind of light, and then you get the best tight end with Travis Kelce. So yeah, that's my team. My team ends up being Kyler Murray, Najee Harris, Calvin Ridley, and Travis Kelce. B. Scott's team ends up being Patrick Mahomes, Jonathan Taylor, DK Metcalf, and Kyle Pitts. So not too bad, not too shabby picking our NFL rosters here. And so we'll have that up. Decide in the comments, in the in the chat, who you guys think had the better draft, whose team you think is better. We'll release a graphic and put it on Twitter as well. So, but before we get out of here for the week, we want to talk about the MLB Playoff Push because it is incredible. First of all, we'll talk about what's already been clinched. That is the AL East, which went to the Rays, the AL Central, which went to the White Sox, the NL Central, which went to the Brewers. Now, the Giants and Dodgers have both clinched playoff berths, but the NL West is still undecided. What's about to be clinched, the AL West, it's just a matter of, putting, pen to paper. As far as that's concerned, the Astros in the AL West, they will be your champion. It's just a matter of time. And the NL wild card, the Cardinals are going to play the NL West runner-up. The Cardinals, I think, are like one game up. Their magic number is 1 as far as clinching. So all they got to do is win one more game, and they're in the clear there. Now, what's at stake going into tonight, Tuesday night, the NL East? That's the Braves. who are 2.5 games up on the Phillies, who are currently in a 3-game set. We are going to give you some scores here. I know they're going to be a little dated if you listen to this on tomorrow, or if you watch it on YouTube. So it's the Braves and Phillies are going at it in a 3-game set. The Braves do finish at home against the Mets. The Phillies will finish at the Marlins. In the NL West, the Giants are 2 games up on the Dodgers. The Giants host the D-backs and the Padres to finish their season. The Dodgers host the Padres and the Brewers to finish out their campaign. And then the AL wild card, which is nuts. Right now, the 2 teams that will be playing in the AL wild card game are the Yankees and Red Sox. The Blue Jays are 1 game back of the second wild card. The Mariners are 2 games back at the second wild card. And the A's are 3 games back. The Yankees are in Toronto for 3, then host Tampa Bay. The Blue Jays finish the season at home against the Orioles. The Red Sox are in Baltimore, then Washington to finish the season. The Mariners host the A's for 3. And then the Angels, the A's will finish with the Astros, but will likely, I would imagine, be eliminated before that point anyway. The top two will play in the wild card game. So really quickly, if you're watching on stream or if you haven't heard, currently right now the Braves are in the bottom of the 6th. They lead 2-0 over the Phillies with Zach Wheeler pitching. So that's a game to keep an eye on. The Brewers are beating the Cardinals 2-0. Again, the Cardinals just have to win 1 game, so they're not super in any kind of danger. Right now, Oakland did lose to Seattle last night, 13-4, I think that final score was. So Seattle already getting it done there. And then you've got the Giants and D-backs coming up. And I think that's it as far as
the Red Sox and the Orioles.
Red Sox and Orioles, top 7. The Orioles lead 3-2 over the Red Sox in the top of the 7th. Oh, yeah, in the bottom of the 5th, the Yankees are leading the Blue Jays 3-2. So, those are your scores there. And, of course, Dodgers-Padres later tonight and Oakland-Seattle later tonight. So, let's go into our hot and cold segment here, hot or cold. First question is, we're just going to go through what's, at stake. First question, hot or cold, the Atlanta Braves will win the NL East. For me, that is a hot take. You've got aces squaring off this week. You've got Zach Wheeler versus Charlie Morton tonight. Aaron Nola versus Max Fried tomorrow night on Wednesday. And then Kyle Gibson versus Ian Anderson on Thursday. The Phillies are 9-7 versus the Braves this season. I think Philly does take 2 of 3. I think of those pitching staff comparisons, even though Kyle Gibson has kind of had a rough go of it in Philly, I think that those matchups line up better for the Phillies, so I think they do ultimately win the series. But I do think that, how it's going to shake out. The Braves are 500 at home and play the Mets. A Mets team that is 25-42 in the second half. I think there was a statistic that I saw that the Mets are have the worst, technically the worst collapse. They're I can't remember, one of the only teams in MLB history or something like that to have the lead. I think the only team to hold the lead as long as they did in the NL East and then finish under 500 because that's already clinched. They've had a terrible second half, so that bodes well for the Braves. And the Phillies have a 453 win percentage on the road this season and are 8-8 against the Marlins. So it's not like they've cruised past the Marlins so far this season. That's going to be a tough end of the season for them, and I think the Marlins have an ability to end the season for the Phillies. Same with the Mets, but I believe more, strangely enough, in what the Marlins can do to the Phillies than I do with what the Mets can do to the Braves right now. The Braves are actually 8-8 against the Mets as well, but believe it or not, I think, like I said, the Marlins are in a better place than the Mets. So I do think the Braves are ultimately going to win the NL East and face the Brewers in the NLDS.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Braves ultimately put this, they clinch it. Like you said, their pitching staff, in my opinion, is what's going to do it for them, just like you said. I don't have too much faith in the Phillies, to be honest. I think the Braves are better suited and have that experience of getting to the postseason and working through the postseason. So I think that's going to be the deciding factor ultimately, is just that experience for these postseason runs.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that was it.
Okay. So moving.
So I think it's a hot take, obviously.
Yeah. So moving on, the Giants will win the NL West. I think that's a hot take as well. The Giants are combined 23-9 versus the Diamondbacks and the Padres this season. 14-2 against the D-backs, 9-7 against the Padres. The Dodgers are also 9-7 against the Padres, but the Brewers took 3 of 4 versus LA and Milwaukee earlier this season. I think both teams will play the Padres, so the Giants have the worst non-common opponent during this final week. So you could say, well, hey, maybe the Padres will take some. Like, the Padres have an opportunity to really shake up the NL West one way or another. They could be like, hey, we're going to go take 2 of 3 from the Dodgers and then take 2 of 3 from the Giants. Well, I think even then you have an opportunity for, in those, like, who do they play in those other 2 series? Well, you get the Diamondbacks, who have only won like 50-some games this season, or you have the Brewers, who have clinched the NL Central. And I know the Brewers technically don't have much to play for, but there's going to be, heck, I think they profit, I think, more, even though they won't play either team until the NLCS, I think they profit more off of, and I think they match up a lot better with the Giants than they do with the Dodgers, because the Dodgers, I think, can go pitcher for pitcher with what the Brewers have. They have the better offensive lineup. The Brewers benefit more from kicking the Dodgers to the wild card game and hoping they lose than they benefit from if the Giants were to go to the wild card game and lose to the Cardinals. That's why I think the Brewers may take that last series a little bit more seriously. So I do think that the Giants will end up wrapping up the division and win the NL West.
This was a tough one for me. Yeah, I'm going to go with a hot take as well. The Giants have just been playing really, really well all season long. And I think that continues on. Like you said, Milwaukee's going to have something to play for because, by pushing the Dodgers to the wild card, that helps them kind of avoid them a little bit. So, and obviously you don't want to have to face the Dodgers, because let's be honest, the Dodgers really aren't a wild card team. They're the defending world champs for a reason.
Right. And
they're playing that way yet again. The addition of Max Scherzer. You don't want to see this team in the postseason. Let's just be honest. Whereas the Dodgers may be kind of thinking, hey, we're in. That's all we really need to do. Let's just get in, and then let's get it. Make sure everybody's rested enough and ready to go for that push through the postseason. Whereas the Brewers are going to be a little bit more gamey. I think ultimately that could be what happens. Even if it doesn't happen, I still think the Giants take the division.
Yeah, no, I guess you could flip it and say, too, that the Brewers, because these are 2 potential teams that will face off in the playoffs, maybe the Brewers, I don't know how much you can really do this, but, like, maybe not show anything they're going to show. Like, because, it's kind of tough, because you want to get your guys you're going to be throwing in the playoffs, like, out there, like, as far as pitchers go, but you also don't want the Dodgers to figure out something in that last series of the year that can carry off into a series, but then again, could then be the spin zone of why you would think the Brewers would want to win and push them to a 1-game wild card. Because that's the thing. I think it's a lot easier to explain away the Dodgers if they were to lose in the wild card game. Like, oh, who saw the Giants coming? Like, you have the Giants. The Giants in a 7-game series, their game 1 starter is going to be Kevin Gausman, who I don't think has ever started a postseason game. Whereas, if you're playing against, the Dodgers game 1 of a playoff series, you're going up against Max freaking Scherzer. So, it's the Brewers have a lot to gain by knocking, I think, the Dodgers to that 1-game wild card.
Yeah, I agree. It's a hot take for San Francisco, even though that conversation went more in the terms of the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's kind of nutty because, the Dodgers, their defending champions, are as good, like you said, as they were last year, but then they have to play against the Cardinals, which I don't know who I pick in that game, because as much as I would say, like, oh, it's the Dodgers easily, like, The Cardinals, what's crazy about the Cardinals is that they always seem to be the team that, like, if they win 100 games and they're the NL Central champions, they're going to lose in the first round of the postseason. But if they win if they go to the wild card game and they win that wild card game, all bets are off. That's literally how they won in 2011. Is they went to the wild card game, beat the Braves, and then rode that success all the way to the World Series against the Rangers. So we'll see if that can happen again, I guess. But yeah, I think the Giants wrap it up. I think the Braves wrap it up, and that'll be your playoff in the NL. But how will the AL wrap up? The question is, the Yankees and Red Sox will square off in the AL wild card. This is a cold take for me, and I'll tell you why. The Blue Jays, I think, will take. I mean, I know they're currently losing right now, but I think the Blue Jays will defeat the Yankees and the Orioles. The Jays are 17-8 in September, 21-9 at home since returning to the Rogers Center, and have won 10 of 16 against the Yankees. They're also 11-5 against the Orioles. So that bodes well for the Blue Jays to have a good into their season. The Yankees, I think, will both lose against Toronto and lose against Tampa Bay. The Yankees will fall to the Jays for the reasons I mentioned just a second ago. And I just have a hunch the Rays will just, even though they already have it wrapped up, I mean, they, one, seem to always have the Yankees number, and two, will also, I mean, it's you're going up against Big Brother. I mean, no matter what the team is, whether it's the Red Sox, Blue Jays, Rays, whoever, they're going to want to knock the Yankees out of the postseason. So I think the Rays will relish at that, and the Rays have so much depth that I think they're able to go out there and beat the Yankees, even if they don't throw out their A lineup, their top of the line guys the entire series. So I think the Yankees will lose both of those series to end the year. The Red Sox, I think they will. I mean, they're losing again. They're losing now,
and they have Chris Sale pitching tonight.
Right.
That's not encouraging.
No.
Chris Sale pitching is encouraging, but the way they're losing, that's not encouraging.
Right. I think they do ultimately, though, defeat the Orioles in the series, and I think they also will beat the Nationals. The Red Sox have won 12 of 13 versus the Orioles since the O's swept the opening series from the Red Sox, which is wild to think about that first series of the year when. Because remember, during 2020, when they had the expanded playoffs, the Orioles at one point were in contention to make the playoffs, so when they had that sweep, they had Trey Mancini going crazy that first series of the year. They had John Means throw the no-hitter in April. Things were looking halfway up for the O's, and then just haven't since then. And so I don't think the Orioles, even though they have an opportunity again, just like the Padres, they have an opportunity to really shake up the NL West. The Orioles can really shake up the AL wild card if they were to take 2 of 3 from Boston and then take 2 of 3 from the Blue Jays, or sweep the Blue Jays or whatever. But I just don't see it in them. And then the Nationals not only will have nothing to play for in that last series of the year, but they aren't playing a divisional opponent. So they're not playing against the Orioles to potentially knock their interleague rival out. They're not going to be playing the Mets or the Braves or the Phillies to try to knock them out. They're just whatever, playing against the Red Sox, I guess. You've got, maybe Schwarber having a homecoming there, but other than that, there's not really a whole lot to play for. So I think the Red Sox win both of those series. And then you've got Seattle, who I think will win their series against Oakland, which will eliminate Oakland on the season. The Mariners are 12-4 now, 13-4 versus the A's in 15-8 in September. And I also think they beat the Angels. The M's have taken 10 of 16 from the Angels this season. So I think the way it's going to wrap up, I think Seattle's going to perform well. I think the Red Sox are going to play well, and I think the Blue Jays are going to play well. It's going to be at the expense of the Yankees and A's, kicking them out, and because Seattle's literally chasing the two other teams that did well, Seattle's going to be kind of out of it. And that's going to lead to a AL wild card of the Red Sox hosting the Blue Jays for all the marbles, with an opportunity to go face the defending AL champion Tampa Bay Rays in the ALDS.
Great. So I agree that this is a cold take, but I don't think the Red Sox are going to make it. The Red Sox just aren't playing which is funny because they were one of the most dominant teams for most of September. But seeing that they're losing now to the Orioles, and after now they're coming off of getting swept by the Yankees.
Well, in terms of winning the division, they're the Mets. They had this great start to the season, looked like the team to beat in their division, and then ever since the All-Star break, haven't really had it. I mean, Matt Barnes, before going on the COVID list, I think he might be back, but he was an All-Star, hasn't really done much in the second half of the season. You've had Adam Ottavino, who kind of is. Who it's been up and down. You're getting high leverage innings out of Garrett Whitlock, who ended up on my fantasy team at one point because I was like, well, I mean, I guess if Ottavino and Barnes aren't getting it done, let's bring in this guy. So yeah, I mean, it's just been not good.
Right, and to be honest, that hot start out of the gate kind of surprised us all. I would have to say,
right.
Not really expecting the Red Sox to be contenders this year, and then it was like, can they be? Maybe, and then you're like, nah. They are who we thought they were. And I don't have the faith. I think, they were riding high in September. They had one of the better ERAs in Major League Baseball. They were up there at the top of the stat charts for the month of September. And then the series against the Yankees. This was a make or break series this past weekend, and they laid an egg. I mean, they got swept, and I feel like it's going to take the wind right out of their sails. And if you lose the first game of a series against the Orioles when you have Chris Sale on the mound, that does not set up things well for you. The Yankees are playing a lot better right now. I honestly think the Yankees ultimately get in. I can see the Blue Jays getting in. I don't know if that can happen if they lose to the Yankees.
I would think that because Tampa Bay's Toronto's one game back now, so I think if they lose to the Yankees, that pushes them
even further.
They'd be 2-3-ish games out, and they'd be like. They wouldn't. I don't think they'd be officially eliminated with this series, but they definitely would be like they have
unless
to
like I guess.
And,
I guess the way things stand, maybe with the Red Sox, like they can just like back themselves in some way. I don't know. It's going to be tough. I think the saving grace for the Red Sox, though, is the fact that they closed it out against the Nationals, and the Nationals, like you said, just have nothing to play for right now other than just getting through it. That may be the one saving grace. And who knows, maybe, the Red Sox always seem to go into Baltimore and just drop one. So not too surprising.
Literally what happened in game 162 back in that 2011 season where they that was the fried chicken Josh Beckett season, I think.
Bobby Valentine.
Yeah.
Let's just not talk about that one. I mean, that was a team that was loaded with talent, loaded. I feel like if there was anybody else at manager, that team could have been really, really good. But you had Bobby Valentine. I don't know what they were thinking. You know what we should do? We should replace one of the best managers we've ever had in Terry Francona with Bobby Valentine. What?
Yep.
What? That's like two polar opposites.
Well, and I mean, if you think about
especially when you went out and ended up getting the manager. Well, I guess the reason that happened is because Jim Farrell had just taken the Blue Jays position, and you were not gonna go bring him in as your manager. He wasn't gonna leave the Blue Jays like that quickly,
right?
And, and that's who ultimately you wanted. That's ultimately who they got.
Look, I mean, they had just watched the Orioles take Buck Showalter from ESPN, so let's plunk another ESPN talent. And because Valentine, I think, was on ESPN before he went to manage the Red
Valentine
Sox.
Was a clown, even as a manager and as a commentator.
whose claim to fame was getting ejected and then coming back with sunglasses in not for the Red Sox but with the Mets. So. Definitely not the greatest eras in Red Sox history, for sure.
No, not at all. But yeah, I don't have the faith in the Red Sox to make that push. If they get into the postseason, they're going to back their way in, and it's because other teams didn't do what they should have done to get into the postseason.
Yeah, I think So right now, bottom of the sixth, it's the Yankees up 3-2, and top of the eighth, it's still 3-2 Orioles. I mean, It's not like the Orioles bullpen is airtight, so I mean, it could still happen. But
like I said, the Red Sox don't typically go into Baltimore and sweep. They always seem to drop one.
Yeah,
it feels like.
And I think it'll be interesting because if let's say they go on and they lose, or if you're listening to this, on Wednesday, they've already lost. And they've already lost. I think Wednesday night's game will be pivotal because either after losing game one to the Orioles, they could be like, oh no, we're about to lose it, or they could be like, well, guys, we got to tighten this up. Let's go win these next 2 games against the Orioles. Let's finish strong with taking 2 out of 3 from the Nationals, and let's get into the postseason. Whereas, if they were to go out and lay an egg against Baltimore, then turn around and find themselves down in game 2 of that series, then maybe it really will go and start to unravel. If they get swept, if they suffer back-to-back sweeps by the Yankees and Orioles, that's not a good sign.
No, but at the same time, it might be the best possible scenario for them. They don't need to get to the wild card game, play the Yankees, and get embarrassed.
But they could also win that game too, because there's nobody whoever makes that wild card game. I have no prediction to make.
And that's true. I guess if you look at it, Chris Sale did not pitch in the series over the weekend.
Right, and I think because there's a very real possibility, and I think honestly the Red Sox match up a little bit better with the Rays than the Yankees do. So if you're the Red Sox, you're thinking, hey, if we can make it to the postseason, win that one, if we get past, that 1-game wild card, maybe we play the Rays, beat the Rays. Maybe we find ourselves in the ALCS against the winner of the White Sox and the Astros. Now, I don't think they get by either of those teams, but I think that it definitely puts them in good shape if they do, end up pulling out a postseason berth.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Well, and if you enjoyed those last few minutes of the podcast, you're going to definitely enjoy next week because we are going to have our MLB postseason schedule postseason special. It'll be a little bit more geared towards the wild card games because we are going to do the podcast before the wild card games happen on Tuesday and Wednesday. But it's definitely going to be a good breakdown of all the different stuff in Major League Baseball. So we're definitely excited for that. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go check out our TikTok, 3C Media, for some shorter content, some just kind of different content than what we do on the YouTube channel. But go also follow the YouTube channel, 3C Media, over there, where we not only have standalone videos and standalone content as the MCT podcast, but you can also watch the show every week as well if you want to do that. And then remember, you can watch us live every week on Tuesdays, on Mondays. You can watch us live on twitch.tv/CraigCrash. If you want to interact with us in the chat. Again, thank you to L, who was keeping us company in the chat tonight. I'm dying, so we're going to get through this really quickly here. And then remember, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
You can also, if you want to follow me, you can follow me at Crash Course FM. Like I said, next week will be a lot of MLB as the postseason will be in full force. We're really excited for that. But until then, have a good week, everybody.